Hear this word of grace. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and I am life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, yet shall they live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I hold the keys of death. Because I live, you shall live also. Family and friends, we have gathered here to praise God and to witness to our faith as we celebrate the life of Al Renfrew. We come together in grief, acknowledging our human loss. May God grant us grace that in pain we may find comfort, in sorrow hope, and in death resurrection. Let us pray. O God, who gave us birth, you are ever more ready to hear than we are to pray. You know our needs before we ask and our ignorance in asking. Give to us now your grace that as we shrink before the mystery of death, we may see the light of eternity. Speak to us once more your solemn message of life and of death. Help us to live as those who are prepared to die. And when our days here are accomplished, enable us to die as those who go forth to live, so that living or dying, our life may be in you, and that nothing in life or in death will be able to separate us from your great love. In Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen. I'd like to invite Wilf Martin and Leonard Teitelbaum to share with us the words of the 23rd Psalm that have comforted generations.
This is an honor. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Love you, Al.
Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
To you, Judy, Debbie, Mark, to all the in-laws, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, Brother George, we grieve with you, and the pain of loss sears our hearts as well. It is so hard to say goodbye to this iconic mosaic of a man, this true legend, who was, up until the end, right at the peak of his game. The very fabric of this university that meant so much to him now has a hole in it. The heart of Michigan is its academe, but the blood coursing through its veins runs via the athletic department. And one only needed 2 words to walk through those doors, and that was Al Renfrew. His sense of humor was legendary. Didn't matter if we'd heard the jokes several times and years before, we still laughed. Maybe not that hard. Now, playing golf with him and Wally Grant of blessed memory was a true athletic event. It hardly mattered we finished an hour behind everybody else. Red turning that color. Always waited out of respect, but also knowing that the good times wouldn't start until Al showed up. His memory for names was amazing. I've never seen anything like it. He was an encyclopedia. And he always wrote a thank you note. Spelled right, grammar was right, a true son of Toronto. Anyone growing up in Toronto knew the name Holt Renfrew. Now, Al would never be nominated for head of the fashion consulting department. But he did teach us that we could wear the same top coat for at least 2 decades. Right, Corky? Corky? Where's Gray? He wore the same coat. The same hat, the same brand of cigar he smoked, and still be respected. Looks didn't matter, character did. And in addition, he taught us to hussy-bussy. No one really knew what that meant, but Al said it a lot. He also taught us integrity. He had that rare commodity that these days doesn't seem to be in existence, and he had it in abundance. We were put here on earth to make things better as a debt owed. Al would receive an invoice for this, marked overpaid, refund due. It should be some comfort that in the final moments of his life, he was surrounded by 2 things he valued most: family and friends. Judy was wheeling Al down the corridor of the rehab center to meet Will Martin, who took Al to lunch at least once a week whenever possible. Now, no doubt Judy was telling Al what not to eat. And Wilf was telling him, don't worry. Al did not die alone, and that is good. Al, I'm sure, wanted to be with Marge and not spend another winter in Ann Arbor. It's been long enough. Marge, I'm sure, met him with a smile, and both said to each other, I missed you. And that's good too. Now, no matter what language you use, arrivederci mi amigo, au revoir mon ami, shalom chaver, goodbye my friend, we will miss you. May the memory of Al Renfrew always be a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Amen.
As some of you may or may not know about Uncle Al, he did appreciate a good joke every now and then, so I thought I would share one of our favorites together, and that's these 2 guys that were sitting at the bar having a few beers together, and one says to the other, so where are you from there, laddie? And he says, well, if you really must know, I'm from Dublin. He says, really, I'm from Dublin, that's a coincidence. He says, where'd you go to school? He said, well, I went to Dublin High School. He says, no kidding. I went to Dublin High School. He said, well, now, isn't that interesting? He said, what year did you graduate? Well, I graduated in 1972. He said, 1972? That's when I graduated. He says, you're kidding. No, he says, what street did you live on? Well, I lived on O'Shaughnessy Street. O'Shaughnessy Street? That's the street I lived on. About that time, another patron comes in and sits down at the bar and says to the bartender, so what's new there, Lenny? He says, oh, not much, except those damn Murphy twins are drunk again. You know I had to tell a twin joke. So, and the reason why Uncle Al never made it on the cover of the hockey version of Gentleman's Quarterly is because he got all of Uncle Vic's hand-me-down clothes. So he never had a chance, and that's where he learned to dress, so we all understand that. So having a chance to talk to some of the other players, and we all called him Rennie, all the guys that played for him, you know that, called him Rennie. And there wasn't anything he wouldn't do for anybody, and he was just one of those people that touched everybody's lives. And to think that if my dad and mom hadn't met, I wouldn't be here, my family wouldn't be here. If Dad hadn't introduced Uncle Al and Marge, none of us would be here. I don't know if that's good or bad, but anyway. He was the type of guy that would do more than anything that you could possibly ask for, and we all loved him for exactly who he was, and you never had to worry about what he thought of you or anybody else. And so, having been where I've been and what I've been through, and all the people who are not here today that wanted to be, that are here in spirit, we all thank and we all love. And I want to close with one of my favorite stories with Uncle Al, because there'll be more about him. Dad sent Donnie and I to the Renfrews to stay our freshman year. Here you go. Al, take care of the boys. I've done all I can with them. Now it's your turn. And I went by the old house on White Street a couple of days ago with Jimmy Keel. And when you grow up in a house, it always seems a heck of a lot bigger than when you go back. How did the 7 of us fit in this place and not get along? Well, we didn't, but that's another story. So, it was, I was late for class one day. And I'm not sure what it was. I know it wasn't my astrophysics final. But I was late, and I was in a hurry, and so I went to Marjorie and said, Marge, I got to get to class. Can I borrow Mark's bike? And Mark wasn't there, and he said, well, she said, sure, just make sure you lock it. No problem. So I went to class, and I get out of class. God, I thought for sure I parked that bike here. Uh-oh, somebody stole it. So I walked back, and I dreaded the whole walk back to the house. I walk in the front door. Marge says, yes. You know, Mark's bike? Yes. Well, you know, you told me to lock it? She says, yes, did you? And I said, no, not exactly. She says, what do you mean? It got stolen. And she looks at me and she goes, well, have you had any lunch today? That wasn't Mark's reaction. He was a little more upset. So, a little later on, Uncle Al calls and Aunt Marge is sharing the story with him. And all Uncle Al said was, Marge, whatever you do, don't let Dougie borrow the car.
Those are good.
They're true.
That's the scary part, isn't it?
Judy asked if I would say a few words about her dad, and Judy, Mark, and Debbie actually. And as I started to think about that, I said, how do you say a few words about Al Renfrew? Like how do you carve down our life? I don't know. I joined Al's life back in the spring of '65, and I am lucky enough to be part of the Renfrew family today, and I consider that a great privilege. Because I'm back in town, I had the honor, privilege of spending a lot of time with Al during his rehab. I retired, Al was there, it was hard to do much else but go see Al. And I thought I would like to give you guys an idea of what the last few weeks of Al's life were like, where he was at, how he was thinking, and those types of things, because many of you didn't have the privilege of being able to see him, some of you not for a while, but this is a very easy and fun story to tell, and I'll try and highlight some of the things we discussed and thoughts he was having. As I started out to think about what I wanted to say and I collected my thoughts about Al, I just realized how many lives he has touched. 22 years as a hockey coach, 16 of them here at Michigan, as well as 17 years helping Marge run the ticket department. He often made light of that and would say that, you know, I had the title, but Marge is the one who ran the department. And Al thought he was telling us something we didn't know. So, as I would go up and visit with Al, normally Judy, I'm not sure if you went home the first week you were there. I think you stayed 24/7 for the first week or so, damn close to it. But I'd walk in and Judy would say, Jimmy, why don't I go for a walk and you and Dad can have a talk? And so Judy, as many of you might know, is a prolific walker, so her walk, she could be gone an hour and a half, you know. Al and I would sit 2 hours. 2 hours, yes. And so we did talk. We had great talks. And Judy, I thank you for that time. because it was fun, and believe me, we had more than a few laughs. I mean, you know, Al, but his mind was totally engaged. On the Sunday after Michigan had played up at Michigan Tech, and we got spanked a couple of times, and I walked into his room, he said, "Jimmy, what the hell's going on anyway? Let's sit down here and see if we can figure this out." And so, you know, we sat down and started to speculate a little bit about what Red might have done wrong, or his boys might have done wrong. And it quickly just got on to other things, because we knew we didn't know much about the game. Neither one of us watched it on TV. I'm not even sure it was on TV, but at any rate, he said, "Jimmy, do you know that that was Red's first trip into that building? That's the John McGinnis rink up in Tech." And I thought for a minute, and I said, I think I did read somewhere that this was Red's first trip up there, because we have not been playing Michigan Tech, and so this was sort of a new relationship. And I said, yeah, I think I did read something about that. He said, "Do you remember our first trip? You and me coached in that building, the very first game they opened the building. We played the first game against Michigan Tech. You remember that?" Yeah, Coach, I guess if you bring, yeah, I think I do remember that. And, you know, he said, "I have to send you, don't you remember? I have to send you down and tell the band to shut up because they kept playing while the play was going on. Do you remember that?" Yeah, Coach, I did remember that. But he then followed that up by saying, "You know, Jimmy, I am so lucky. I remember everything." And he was so lucky, and he knew it. And he knew some of his friends, many of his friends weren't so lucky. And he cherished, and that's why he told a lot of these stories. And some of the things that I just want to see if I can pass along to you was Al he was on top of his game right up to the very end. I really wanted to relate that story not as an example of how dull my memory is, but how fabulously sharp Coach was. He was still one to talk. Another day when I got over there, Mark and I, we went down to watch his physical training. His you know, the physical therapist said, "Come on, Al," came into the room. "Come on, we got to go work out." So, you know, shuffled the wall with Al. She got him in the room, and she'd hook him up with the exercise he had to do. And I remember one of them was he was on a reclining bike, and so he had the pedals going, and he had hand pedals too. And so she'd, "Okay, you got to do this for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it was." So here we go. Al's up there, he's doing his hand pedal. Then he'd start talking to Mark and I. And pretty soon, this was just leaning. His feet were still going, but he was yakking. He was telling stuff. And it was also amazing. People would come in off the hall. Staff members would come in. People would come in. "Where's the hockey coach in here anyway?" That's me, you know, and lo and behold, they'd tell a story, and they'd say, "You probably don't remember, but you helped me get football tickets for my grandkid," or "You always used to say hello to my son behind the bench at the Michigan games." And the physical training lady would be standing there waiting for the person to get back out of there so she could come back over and get Coach focused on what he was supposed to be doing. But when he got back to focus, you remember the bar he was working with, Mark? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and he was focused. He absolutely wanted to get stronger. He wanted to get past this, and he was doing it. He was getting stronger every single day, and it was fun to see. But that poor physical therapist, she had some problems. You know, another day I arrived, and Al just wanted to talk. We were off in our walk, and he wanted to talk about his family. And he just started out, he said, "You know, I have had a very happy life, a very good life." And he said, "I wouldn't change a thing except for one, and that was March leaving too soon." He said the rest of it, he said, I am absolutely pleased with it, I am happy. And then he went in and he talked about each one of you children. And it was sort of neat. He said, Debbie, he was so thankful. These were his, I am so thankful for Debbie. She has that beautiful smile, and she is always smiling. And he glowed, and he said he has really enjoyed watching you as you became a mother, and what a fabulous mother you are. And you know, somehow you don't think about Coach and deep thoughts and thinking, but he was into talking about his family. So he was pretty happy to have you, Debbie. And Mark, he said, do you know how courageous my son Mark has been? I mean, his whole life he has been battling this terrible disease of diabetes. And he said, I'm not sure I ever told Mark how very proud I was of how hard he's fought and the way he fought the battle. So I don't know if he ever told you that, but he just did. He did, and he just was glowing. He said, Mark was my only son. And he said, sometimes I think he probably got a little PO at having to share me with all us guys. And because when you played for Al, he was your father. You were his son. So he knew that you would have to share a lot of his time with a lot of guys, whereas otherwise it would have been just you and him. Judy? You were like his mini Marge. You took such good care of him. You and Kim did your best to discipline him. And he told me, he said, I know that I would have cashed in 3 or 4 or 5 years sooner if it wasn't for you, Judy. And he knew it, he appreciated it, and quite frankly, he was looking to get forward to getting back home so you guys could start setting them straight again. It was all positive. I'm sort of sitting there listening to the coach, and I'm thinking, wow, this is neat. And so that's the type of thing I wanted to share with you today. Just the sharpness of his mind, the fact he was very, very happy with exactly where he was. He would rather have been at some restaurant rather than in home. But at any rate, this week I've talked to a lot of guys who are coming back in, a lot of old former teammates of mine or guys who played before, friends from around the community. And one of the guys from the 64 team had a suggestion, or made a comment. And first of all, if you know the 64 team, they are absolutely the king of reunions. The 64 team will have a reunion to celebrate a reunion. And this one fella, he said to me, he said, I'm not so sure it wasn't about these guys just wanting to come back and hang out with Coach. Because he said, that's really all we were doing. We'd have a reunion, but we'd just spend it hanging out with Coach, and that's what rejuvenated, that's what kept us together. Al was the glue, not just for the 64 team. He was the glue for all his teams. He was the glue for a room full of people here. All the people he met in the ticket management, in the coaches, the lives he changed. I mean, you talk about what would have happened. I mean, if Rennie hadn't asked me to come down to here to school, I think about my whole family. I get 3 of my children graduated from here, granddaughter graduated from here, and I'm thinking that's all because of Rennie. And we had that conversation one day too, and he just sort of laughed at you. But the last thing I want to share with you, and perhaps the most telling of where Al was and how he was and what turned out to be some of his last few weeks. He talked to me about the 4 heart attacks he had. He said, Jimmy, when it happens, it's probably going to happen quickly. He said, I hope it does. And I thought about that for a minute. Again, coaches get pretty heavy with me. I'm not used to this stuff. He thought about those words I thought about those words for a few minutes, and I said, Coach, I wanted to give him something he could understand real well. I says, Coach, when the bell goes, the game is over. And he looked at me for a little bit, and he did a thought. And for all you guys, I know you know this, when Al was about to deliver one of his one-liners, he had a little grin on his face. He had a zinger coming. So he said to me, Jimmy, the bell goes, the game is over. And he said, and I'll bet you there'll be no overtime. And you know what? There wasn't. Al went out exactly the way he wanted. Quickly, no fanfare, and he was on his way to Knights for a burger. It didn't get much better than that. In closing, I'm just going to say a few thank yous, family thank yous. George, thank you for lending us your brother for many years. For Mark. Judy, Mark, Debbie, thanks for your dad. Thank you for sharing him through thick and thin and all that, because he was yours. You shared him. Christine, Nicole, Ryan, Rob, and Greg, thanks for sharing your grandpa.
I'd just like to echo everything that's been said. Thank you. No, this is really good stuff because it's all true, and Al's impact on our lives as players and individuals and families and so on, it's like a major spider web. And my first contact with Al was 1958. And he convinced me to come down on a visit to Michigan. And I met him at the Windsor airport, and he was driving, I'll never forget, a 1955 Chevy station wagon. It was a two-door station wagon. And I said, Al, how come this station wagon only has two doors? And he says, now Judy, no offense, he said, well, you should meet my kids. It's true. So they couldn't escape. So anyway, we got to Ann Arbor, and I had no idea. I was a hick from Regina, and I had no idea about Michigan, and he had just said, don't go to North Dakota, please. He said, I just coached there. You've got to see Michigan. And he built Michigan up on the phone like it was New York City. And really, Lansing would have looked like New York City to me. But I got to Ann Arbor anyway, and I met Howard Weichel. A lot of you guys remember Howard Weichel, and you worked for him at his drugstore. And then I met Al Sims. A lot of us remember Al Sims. He took me down to a butcher shop and met Frenchie LeBeau. And then I went to the brickyard and met Mr. Rohde, and he was half in the bag, and like he usually was. And I don't know if we ever did see the rink, but we went to the football stadium, and he said, now when you get here, I'm going to get you tickets to see Gordie Howe and play Montreal in Detroit. I said, it's a done deal, I'm coming. And that was it. So anyway, I went home, and we had 4 other guys that wanted to go to school, and you'll remember their names, Jerry Kolb, Joe Longhammer, John Pallenstein, and Bill Kelly. And we got together and said, boys, we're going to Michigan. And they had no idea. We had to get a map out and see where Michigan was. And so, and we came down, and Kolb and I hitchhiked from Regina. And we got a ride to Chicago, and then it was game over. They dropped us off in downtown Chicago. And you talk about Hicks with us, and we're looking up at the buildings, and what do we do now? And anyway, we got a bus, and we got to Ann Arbor. And Al was terrific. He just took everybody and did everything for them. And whether it was finding a place to stay, whether it was finding a job, and he had meal jobs set up. He had deals for players on everything around town. It was like he'd been here for 10 years. He'd only been here for 1 year. And then he had a great group of guys like Bob Watts here and Bob White and that whole group. And they had a strong team and a good group of guys. And they took us in. You couldn't play your freshman year, remember? But we were guaranteed we were going to play the Red Wings one game. We had an exhibition game every year against the Red Wings. Well, it doesn't get any better than that. Ross Childs is here, he remembers. And we just had a great experience. So it was easy for me to go back home in the summer and tell Gordie Wilkie and Butler and all those guys, Wilf Martin, and you guys got to go to Michigan. Like, this is not even close. And so we had a nice pipeline of guys coming out of Western Canada. And I don't know if Al ever did go to Regina to see anybody, but he had no assistant coaches, and really he was on his own. And he did a great job finding players. Al Hennigan's here, and Larry Babcock's not with us anymore. Larry was a great player from Chatham, and then Wakabayashi came out of Chatham. So you could see why, because Chatham's only an hour and a half from here, so he could get to Chatham, but he wasn't going to get to Regina. But Al was terrific, and then when our playing days were over and I was on my own, having my own career, and I'd get letters, and you talk about notes, and they were terrific notes. They were right on, something had happened that I should know about, or something we did, or should remember, and Al and Marge, but it was Al's handwriting. Like, I could tell you his handwriting today. If you give me 20 samples, I could pick out Al Renfrew's handwriting, and he was so... he just kept up with everyone, and if he did that with all his players, and I know he did, it was just a great feeling. So when the day came back, when I had a chance to come back here as coach, I was playing for the Red Wings, and Al came over, and Don Lund, and Lundo and Al were just like this. They were buddies, and they come over to convince me to come back and take the coaching job at Michigan. And I was playing for the Red Wings, making big money. I was in the top half of the NHL salary bracket at $80,000. Well, it was. And so Al said, "How'd you like to coach Michigan?" Geez, Al, I don't know if I could coach. I'm not a coach, I'm a player. He said, "Yeah, we need a coach. Do you think you could come?" Well, could I afford to come back? How much would they? Well, about $15,000. 15,000. Well, how about half of what I'm making now at 40,000? 40,000? He said, 40,000? Canham doesn't even make 40,000. So I said, look, I didn't come back to Michigan to figure this out and make a decision to take a job like this. But I remembered when I got my MBA at Michigan, and I was playing for Montreal, and I called Al and said, "Do you think I could get in the business school to get my MBA? I'd like to come back this summer." And he said, "Well, let me look into it." I don't even remember signing any paperwork, but I got a call a few weeks later. He said, "Well, you're all set." And David Brophy's here from the business school, so he'll appreciate how times have changed. And Brophy is a Canadian from the Maritimes, and he had just finished his PhD in Ohio State, and I was one of his first pupils in the summer school in the B school, and we became long-lasting friends because of hockey. And so it was interesting how Al affected all of us in school, or even after we left school. And then sure enough, the opportunity to come back to Michigan as a coach happened again, and this time I said, well, I have a job in Buffalo, and I'm still making $80,000, as a matter of fact. And he said, well, geez, you're going to have to talk to Canham about that. Well, anyway, long story short, and Wilf was very supportive, and Lundo, and all my friends, and so we got to come back to Michigan, and I was so lucky. So guess who my mentor was? I was over in that ticket office about every second day. Al, what the hell? What should I do with this or that? And he was good. Oh no, you can't do that. This is Michigan, and so. But this is, and he said, listen. The team that scores the most goals is going to win the game. Well, that's a lot of help. And then we finally got to be good, and we're going to the NCAA tournament. He said, remember now, the team with the best goalie is going to win. And so I'm looking cautiously at our goalies. And once we got Turco, I knew we were in good shape. So, but he was right on. And you couldn't ask for a more devoted fan. I thought he lost some of his passion when he retired from the ticket office. And I remember just before he retired, he had one of his heart problems, and I rushed to the hospital. We'd been on vacation. I got back. I couldn't. What's wrong? And he, oh, geez, there's doctors. They think I'm going to die. And Marge had some problem with her leg, and she had a cast on. And I said, well, can Marge even get up to see you? Can she drive? Drive, he said. She can't even putt. So it was just the doctor and I were the only ones worried. But this went on, and over the years. So anyway, we were in a game, and I always, I always told people, Al Renfrew, I've never really seen him mad. I saw him yell at the other coaches in the old days, but then I found out after the game they'd go out and have a few beer at one of the local bars, and they're all buddies. And then I saw him yell at the referees. Well, the referee went with them after the game. Well, times have changed. But so nevertheless, we're in this regional game in '98 at Yost, and we're playing #1 seed was North Dakota, but we've got home ice. And this game goes into all kinds of directions. And we have 2 goals called back. We get 2 players thrown out of the game. And I find out between the second and third period, Al Renfrew literally, he physically accosted the Frank Cole, who was the head of officials for the NCAA, and people are having to separate them so Frank Cole doesn't get dragged out of the rink. Al was so upset at the officials, and I was glad to hear that. Good for him. He's still a coach. He still knows what it feels like to be a coach, even though he was watching from upstairs. But nevertheless, I got to see Al just before we went to Michigan Tech and got our butts kicked, and like Jimmy said, and we did. And he asked about, now this is one of his great friends was John McGinnis, and John's wife's name was Jerry, and Jerry's still up there in Houghton. And sure enough, Mel Pearson, the coach at Tech that coached here for 25 years with me, and Mel had a reception, a luncheon for their fan club before the game, and I went there, and sure enough, Jerry McGinnis was there. And so I gave her Al's best. He wanted to be remembered, and of course we didn't know it was going to be this kind of remembrance, but he wanted to say hi to Jerry, and they had a lot of history together. And he had a lot of history with all those guys, whether it was Mariucci or McGinnis or Lefty Smith and so on. But the one that touched me the most was Lou Lamoriello, and most of you don't know Lou Lamoriello. He's the general manager and president of New Jersey Devils. But Lou Lamoriello was a young coach in Providence when Al was coaching at Michigan. And somehow Al and his group, they took Lou Lamoriello under their guidance as a young coach, and they treated him so well. And so all these years that Lou Lamoriello's been GM of New Jersey, every year he would have Al Renfrew and Lefty Smith, and I forget who the other ones were that were still alive. Charlie Holt. And these were the good old boys of college hockey, but they'd been really good to Lou. Lou would bring them to New York City and wine and dine them and take them to their game and meet the coaches and so on. Well, Al would come back like he was 10 years younger every time he went out there. And I thought that's really something special, because we're missing some of that in coaching now, or we're missing it in business, we're missing it in the athletic department. But Al is one of the last links between, you think about it, Fritz Chrysler, Don Canham, all the old Bo Schembechler. He knew all the coaches. He was buddies with all the different sports coaches. Were like a family. And I got to feel a little bit of that family for a while, and I'll remember what it's like, and I'll never forget Al Renfrew. So thanks for listening.
Well, first of all, thank you everybody for coming here, because it meant so much for Dad, for all the friends and everybody that he had, and family and teammates and everything. He would have been mad he's missing this. And I just wrote a little bit. My dad, give of yourself to your teammates and friends. Marry the love of your life, Marge. Give of yourself to your family. Give of yourself to your players, staff, and your university. Give of yourself to make things happen, to live life to its fullest, and be a friend to all. And at the end, your life will be complete. My dad loved the university more than you can know. From the coaches that went before him while he was there, and to the current staff, to the fans and alumni he worked with, to the men and women that he honored, he was an ambassador to the university. People loved to be with him and listen to him. Many of you know his accomplishments as a player, coach, and ticket manager. Many of you know how he loved to tell stories, speak, and be involved. He lit up a room with his humor, and he made everybody have a good time. Many of you have heard the infamous stories about the mattresses, the fires in the wall, hoses on cars, getting his cigar lit while sleeping, players and friends buying him old and new clothes. But some of the things that made him a dad special to me are his caring about all of us, from my mom, the kids, to the dogs. Watching hockey night in Canada down in the basement at 1409 White Street with Dad. Watching his Wildcat rip the hose off the side of the house with water pouring in the basement, and hearing how Dad and Mr. Hoisington, the Dean of Engineering at Michigan, went to retrieve it the next day, leaving Wildcat with the impression that Mr. Hoisington was on the staff at the Ann Arbor News. He was looking for weeks for the article. My dad forgetting to call Mom when Gordie Howe and Bill Gadsby came over to the house to meet Dad. Mom had curlers on and was frantically vacuuming the house. Sometimes he forgot our names. Debbie, Susie, Muggsy, whatever your name is. The invention of the tape recorder was put to test when Dad fell asleep one day on the couch. For days, we played the recording of him snoring to everybody who walked through the door. The tape mysteriously disappeared. Sometimes he would also almost electrocute me while working with a broken extension cord. Guess that thing doesn't work anymore. He would even take me to mow Benny Oosterbon's lawn, which was 10% lawn and 90% crab apples, which he picked up while I mowed the 10 minutes of the lawn. Dad painting the house with the old stadium wood that he draped over the two dormers, bouncing up and down, and Mom and I taking bets as to the likelihood of his falling. When listening to the Beatles in the basement with friends, he would show up and he'd be dancing. He'd go, da na 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 da 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 na 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 na. Now he says, now that's real music. He even got me 6-row tickets for the Beatles at Olympia, but only after promising them to me and promptly forgetting to get them. I believe they were the last tickets a guy had left. Camping with my family and friends was always an adventure. We loved listening to the stories and the skits. From the Artie Bell stories, which we begged Dad to tell, to the we're gonna build a house. Boo, a public house, yay. If you're lucky, one of us will get up at the celebration and repeat this. He loved his cottage and working on it. I was a designated helper at Mom's insistence. Go see what your father's up to when he'd hear any kind of electrical machinery operating. He loved his float boat too. At the advice of a neighbor, he tried to take it under a too low of a bridge and ripped off the console the first month he had it. Another time he took a bunch of his friends down one fall, probably from the athletic department, and he promptly ran out of gas because he forgot to fill the gas tank, borrowing from 3 or 4 different households. It took them about 2 or 3 hours to get back. I knew they were having dinner, so I turned the oven on. Well, the steaks were in the oven, so they were very well done. He was patient with all of us kids, learning to drive. He never said anything about any of the mistakes we made. He loved to tease us, and when I would worry about a student who got hurt, he would say, if you just played dodgeball, that would have never happened. And of course, I had to tell him that we don't play dodgeball anymore. He had a memory like an elephant. They kept asking him his birthday in the hospital or in the rehab, and he would say, is this a trick question? He was sharp as a tack until the day he died. He loved to tell his stories. He embellished them just a bit. He loved to laugh, and he laughed harder than anybody else at his own jokes. He loved Bear Lake days and all the neighbors up north, well, most of them, watching the parade and telling everybody, you can tell when the parade's over when the Scottsville band comes around a second time. He told me things, but one of his favorite things he said to me is, Judy keeps talking until she thinks of something to say. Or I wish you were on the radio so I could turn you off. He had his Egg McMuffin every morning, no butter or Canadian bacon, and the newspaper. He loved his crossword puzzles and sports. He loved his paper, hated computers, but promptly asked me to look up the college hockey scores when they didn't appear in the newspaper. He was so proud of my mom, how hard she worked, how patient and smart she was. He and my mom listened to our ideas, our hopes, our dreams, and encouraged us. His biggest advice to me was, your greatest worries never come true. He did so much for so many, and I count myself lucky to have had him and my mom and my parents as mentors. I will always say, what would they do? It helped me guide me through my life and helped me make good choices. They were both my heroes that I looked up to.
Well, I'm not going to be funny like that. I'm Debbie. I'm the youngest. And I'm the one that's kind of like the black sheep of the family. I went to Michigan State. And as Judy reminds me, she paved the way because she tried to go to Michigan State but never got there. Anyways, I'm not used to talking to a lot of people. I have talked to a group of people playing bingo and calling out the cards when I had a job at a nursing home. Anyways, my dad. My dad was a humble, sincere, and caring person who made an impact on so many people, as you see here, the University of Michigan hockey and ticket office, family and friends. He was a true Michigan man who was selfless, a man of tradition, competitive on the playing field, and gracious off. Yet he was just my dad. Someone I looked up to, along with my mom, listened to, had memorable vacations with, to the cottage and camping. One of my favorite memories was at the Pinery. And that's when my dad and Uncle George, they'd get us all lined up out in the waves. And Dad and Uncle George would tell us how to jump in or dive into the wave, and then we would all follow and do the same thing. And that was just so much fun. It was togetherness, and it was family. We also had the skits, which Judy's kind of shared a little bit about. The last night of camping around the campfire. It was tradition. We had a lot of tradition in our family. And we had a lot of fun. They even had one where Dad would have all us kids get out of the seats so all the adults could get into the seats. Anyways, the other thing that I really enjoyed, he would take us to the garbage dumps when we were up north so we could see the bears. Kind of like if you've seen that John Candy movie, The Great Outdoors. Only we didn't have the Clark bar. And that was exciting for us because we didn't see bears except for in the zoo. Those were the days. My dad, my family have been there for me whenever I've needed them. in good times and in not so good times. They have dropped everything to give me support, and that is what family does. My dad has given me some good advice. Judy's already mentioned one of them about your worst fears never come true. And I pass these on to my loved ones in my life when they're appropriate, or, you know, I'm a social worker, so I do a counseling too, and they comes in handy. Other ones are, there's a silver lining in every cloud. And I find those silver linings. And my best, or my most favorite, and I have it on my email page. It only takes a little bit more to go first class. And that was my dad. Now, he didn't look like he was somebody who went first class. As you've all heard and has been observed. And as Louise Mann had mentioned in the past, he sort of matched when he went into the work at the ticket office. But he treated others as first class. Everyone left feeling good and having had a good laugh. And this is something that I have tried to follow in my own personal and work life, treating each person uniquely and with sincerity. My dad and my mom were very proud of all of us kids and their grandkids and their great-grandkids. And he would have the cutest little smile watching the grandkids do their little antics as they do, and they just chuckle away, and he just really enjoyed them. I know my dad and my mom will continue to be a part of my life as I witness their influence through family and friends and sense their presence. But they're truly missed, truly and deeply missed. I want to thank you all for coming and helping us remember my dad, sharing your stories, and celebrating his life, and also my mom's, as she was so much a part of his life, even though she's been gone for 7.5 years. We are blessed to have our parents and all of you in our lives. And we hope that you can all join us over at the Young Center today at 6 o'clock. We're going to meet over there, or whenever you get there. We're going to be going over there right afterwards to set up. So if you get there early, we'll put you to work. Anyways, thank you so much.
Yeah, until Dougie told that story about the bike, I never knew what happened to that. So now I know. Yeah, so I think everybody here knows I don't have very good eyesight. But anyway, I got a cute little story that I can tell about Big Al when he was a ticket manager. And he would get my friends and myself tickets for football games. And we'd go on road trips. We'd go to Columbus, we'd go to East Lansing. And this one trip, we just happened to be going to a Michigan State game. And I got up to the gate, and I'm looking around, and I'm watching the people go in.
And then I tried to go in. Well, I had a little medicinal beverage on me that I wasn't supposed to have. And of course, they stopped me. They frisked me. They gave me a ticket for $100, and then they kicked me out of the game. So now I'm not going to see the game. Well, that really hurt, you know. And so then I thought about it, and I said, now, all I got to do is find will call. So I went down and I found Al and Marge, and I ended up getting another ticket. I told them I lost the ticket. So, you know, I was going to get back at that guy who frisked me, because he was only frisking the Michigan people. He wasn't frisking any of the Michigan State people. So I went to a different gate, and they let me in, and I eventually found my friends, and so we made our road trip home, and then I had to tell my dad on Monday what happened to me, because I had to go back up to East Lansing to pay the ticket. I thought I was going to get away with it. Well, in any event, we got up there. I paid the $100 fine. And, you know, the whole time we're driving up there, he's not saying anything to me. He's not criticizing me. He's not mad at me. He, you know, it was almost like he was sticking it to Michigan State because he didn't like the green and white. And so that's my experience up at Michigan State. Yeah, my father, he really was my coach and my best friend. And we spent a lot of time together. I don't see too well anymore. So he was driving me all over the place. Doctor's appointments, just everywhere. He did everything for all of us. And I'm always going to remember him for being such a great dad. And I miss him a whole lot. I think in closing, I just want to say that we'll all have a lifetime of memories. I know Al's up there now with Uncle Vic, and he's got Coach's Corner up there now. He's got Amo, he's got Johnny Mac, he's got John Mariucci, he's got Lefty Smith, and we'll never forget him.
Spend time with Bob Ufer. In fact, I used to pay insurance premiums to him. But it was also the time, and I know the daughter of Don Lund is here, and of course Fritz Chrysler and Don Canham. They were great days, and I got to spend 20 years here during that time. Al and I both had the infusion of the University of Michigan spirit. But like so many that came to the university as a student, that the good fortune was to be put on the university payroll. You got paid to live here in Ann Arbor, and that was really wonderful. Both Al and I shared that. Al was a great hockey coach. I certainly enjoyed the games, but in 1973 he became the ticket manager, and that's where we really got introduced. Al's skills were then really put to the test. At that time, the real measurement of your worth in the university was where your seats were in the stadium. And it was always a question, how close are you to section 23, that line that goes down the middle, it's a 50-yard line. And at the beginning of every football season, you'd come a little early because you wanted to see who shot up in rank, or maybe people who didn't. I knew Don Weir, the ticket manager before Al. Don Weir told me that he had a typical call several times a year. Somebody would call and say, hey, I was reading the obituaries, and Professor so-and-so died, and can I get his tickets? Well, Al had to take those questions, and that was made even tougher by the other personnel decision that was made about that time, or just before that time, to make Bo Schembeckler our coach. Tickets were in demand, and Al had all those burdens. Al had to go through getting rid of Band Day. He had to get rid of the Boy Scouts to be ushers. It was one that we used to have some dog that used to run around the field. That was the kind of things that you could do. But Al really had his pressure on him with tickets. Now, in 1977, I decided that I maybe ought to move on, and my dad was pleased that I was going to leave the university finally. But I moved to Princeton University and took a job there. And I had my coveted tickets, and after being here for about 20 years, they were nice. They were on the 50-yard line, right on the aisle. And I went to Al, and I said, Al, I want to keep my tickets. I can come back. New Jersey's not that far away. And Al said, John, I need your tickets. What did I do wrong? Well, Al then told me, he said, I'll make you a promise that anytime you want to come to a game, I'll get you tickets. Al never broke that promise. I did learn a couple years later that former Governor George Romney had my football tickets. Al needed them.
They were that good.
I always think about what is the measure of success at universities, and you know, being near the 50-yard line isn't a bad measure. The one that I learned at Princeton University was that your real stature was, were you invited to the croquet party at the president's house? So football is a little better. Although I think I told Jerry Hanlon about when I got to Michigan, I met the new football coach they had there. And he said, you know, John, he said, you came from Michigan, and Michigan has a great football team. Here at Princeton, we've perfected the lookout block. I said, well, what does that mean? Well, he says, you get back into the offensive linemen get into the three-point stance. And they turn around and say, look out, they're coming through. Well, my friendship with Al grew through the years. I would come here, we'd go over, Barb and I would come over and see Al and Marge. And in fact, it got to the point where quite honestly, I'd rather go watch a football game with Al in his basement than come over here. We had all kinds of periodic conversations. Al was one of the first to call me. I finally left Princeton University and got a real job. But the real job involved living in the World Trade Center for 17 years. And Al was one of the first to call me, find out how I made out. And I'm here. The other calls that we would have be a variety of subjects. I've never talked on the telephone with somebody about heart attacks. But Al could do that. And he could do it in a funny way. He talked about going on an airplane and getting a heart attack on an airplane, and how he handled that, and how the crew handled it. Al had enough heart attacks that they really made a good conversation piece in his life. Now, just 2 years ago, I had a call from somebody that said they were a friend of Al Renfrew's. They called me at my home. And they said, you know, this fellow called me and said, I want to get my son into the University of Michigan. And I said, well, why did Al suggest that I could help you? And he said, well, Al said you were the only one he knew up the hill. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with those terms, within the athletic department, if you're working up State Street, you're up the hill. And it was a different world. And what are they doing up the hill? So I was very proud that I got to work 20 years up the hill. They are a little different up there. But I was also very proud of the relationships I could have with the athletic department, because this is the heart of the university. This is the spirit of the university. Yes, we're a great university because of our faculty and our students and our research, but the heart of the university, the real Michigan spirit, is represented in this room, represented on this campus, and I've been so happy to be a part of it. Al and Marge embodied that Michigan spirit. In 1990 was the roast that you've seen now on the for Al and Marge. Bo Schembechler spoke at that, said that he knew no one that didn't think the world of both of them, and said the two of them were by far the couple that gave the most to the university as a couple. It was a tremendous roast. I know that I've played the tape several times, and 1990 was a long time ago. Al had a good long retirement, and unfortunately it couldn't always be with Marge, but she was also part of a long retirement. So I said to some of you already, I think that if you just had one thing you remember about Al that you can share with us, it would be wonderful for you to do that. I was certainly proud of my friendship with him, and will cherish it the rest of my life. And to his family, God bless you for helping to sustain a wonderful man. Thank you.
Goalie's up at it again, but I wanted to...
Get the hook.
The hook already? I wanted to, actually, I was just going to make a few references to people who have helped us with this tonight, and then I heard John up there talking about this stuff and about tickets and all of that sort of thing, and I thought, well, if we're going to talk old stuff, I will just mention that the first time I met John Feldkamp and his bride Barbara, Coach, where are you? Berenson, where are you, Red? Yep. Michigama was common to John, myself, to Coach, and so forth. And one night when we were all done with our big party out at the wigwam at you know, out on Radford Farms. I found that I was in Red's car and there was a keg of beer in the back, in the trunk, and we were headed to his friend John Feldkamp's house. And that's when I first met John and Barbara, and those are some of the old days of how far back it is when I first met John. But at any rate, the other thing I'll mention quickly, which I wasn't going to think about, was the fact that when you talk about tickets, my tickets are on the 50-yard line. They are in row section 1, opposite 23. And one day it was a Sunday afternoon, it was Al's first year as ticket manager, and I was still the assistant hockey coach, and I called Al, I said, "Coach, I'd like to get some tickets." And he, "Oh, okay, where are you, Jimmy?" He said, I'm at my house." He said, "I'll meet you down at the office in 10 minutes. So I went down to the office with a friend of mine and met him, and I'd never been in the ticket office before, and the tickets were back in the safe then, and he opens the safe. I can't believe he could do it without Marge there, but he did. At any rate, he walks in and he goes back and he comes down and he said, "Okay," he walks about halfway down the safe, and he says, "Okay, here, Jimmy, here, you take these. Is that okay?" I didn't know what the hell he was handing me. And then he said to my friend, he said, "Do you want some too?" And he said, "Yes." So, at any rate, I still have those tickets today. And my friend who moved away that next year and never lived in Ann Arbor again, still maintained and came back to the games. And tickets were a powerful commodity back in the day. They still are. Maybe not quite as much. But anyway. So I'll get off that ticket stuff and the old John Feldkamp and kegs of beer and stuff like that. And I wanted to mention what I originally came up for was to give some recognition to some people who have really helped with tonight's situation. It's a big group. Knights have done, Knights Restaurant did the, and as you know, Al was on his way to Knights when he met his maker. And so at any rate, I wanted to mention that Lenny Teitelbaum, who was the trainer in 1964's team, he and Wolfie Martin, Wolf was the captain of the team in 65-66, and they have a small company here in town that's in the real estate business, and they stepped up and told Judy, "We're going to take care of Al's birthday party." Well, thank you, Lenny, thank you, Wolfie. It's not the birthday party we were expecting, but we're still here for the same reason, to honor Al. And that's an easy thing to do. And so Lenny and Wolfie have taken care of dinner tonight. And then, don't you know, I never realized how powerful the student managers were. Because there's a guy named Chuck Reaney who called me and he said, "Can I handle the bar?" I said, "Yeah, I think we can." So Chuck and his wife Julie sitting right down here in front. Last thing I want to mention, as we were putting this together, the whole thing about Al going to Knights, I'll tell you just quickly. I would like to take Al out to dinner once in a while, he and Mark, and I'd call him and say, "Coach, you want to go out to lunch?" Excuse me, not dinner, lunch. And he'd say, "Okay, yeah, Jimmy, that'd be great." He said, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "Oh, Coach, I'm taking you. Why don't you pick where you want to go?" And almost without exception, he would say, "Well, let me see here. Why don't we give that Knights place a try?" And in following that up, I talked to Don Knight, who was helping with the arrangements through Judy to put this on tonight. And I said, "Don't you think it would be a nice thing that one of your booths out at Knights on Dexter would be Al's booth?" And he loved it. He said Rennie and his family were some of our best customers, and so I got to get with Don. We're going to work out which of the booths it is, but there will be an Al Renfrew booth at Knights on a little plaque there, maybe a little picture of Coach, and I don't know, Don, can we get a hamburger that'll be on the wall there? That's Don Knight back there, you guys. So I would say that for all all of you great Knights customers, which we all are, when you go out there and you walk in or you call up, say, can I have Rennie's booth? And if it's open, they'll like to see it's well served, because boy, he certainly did enjoy your hospitality, and thank you very much, everybody.
5th party, but it just surprised me so much. When we were growing up, Dad would always say, when we'd have to go to the bathroom, does anybody have to go Potsy Ryan? And we'd all, you know, it's like Mrs. Murphy, cheaper by the dozen. So we'd stop and go to the bathroom. And I was about 26 or 27 years old, and we're up at Minnesota, and we're with the Minnesota people and the Michigan people at a press party or something, and I met the Minnesota ticket manager, I think he was. And Dad says, Judy, I'd like you to meet Potsy Ryan. My dad speaks of you quite often. What do I say? So, you know, he was quite a character. So I'm going to ask Bill Lord to come on up, because I know he has a few words to say.
Well, first of all, Rennie would have said, get the hell out of here. It's been too long already, so. But I had the pleasure of playing for Al from 64 to 68, and I was blessed to be his captain the last year as a senior, and he was a light of my life. He ranks right up with my own father. As we got along later after the career. But what started my moments with Al was my freshman year. I came over here in August for the orientation, and my beautiful bride, Carol, who's still with me, we're going to celebrate our 50th here in a few months. She was going to school down Lake Forest, above Chicago, and I was over here. So she's, you know, it's August, I'm here for 2 weeks, and gets into early September, and I'm getting a little, you know, lonesome. So I get on State Street, start hitchhiking out to 94. I figure I'll hitchhike down to Chicago and run up and see Carol for a couple days, but it was a Wednesday, not a Friday. So I got my thumb out, and the car pulls over, and I look in, and it's Coach Renfrew. And I said, Lord, where the hell are you going? I said, well, I'm going down to see my girlfriend down in Chicago. He said, well, it's Wednesday. Don't you have classes on Thursday and Friday? I said, no, I got a special schedule here. I said, everything's compacted into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Oh, okay, well, hop in here. I'll give you a ride out to the interstate. And I had a lightweight jacket on and some khakis. And drops me out on at the interstate, and he goes, just a minute. He goes back, pops the trunk, gives me a Michigan leather sweater, or leather jacket. And he says, you know, you'll get a hell of a lot more rides going down there. And I'll never forget it. And every time I stuck my thumb out, a trucker would pull over. I got picked up by a doctor out of Kalamazoo. I mean, I made it to Chicago faster than most people do on their own. So that's my story with Al, and that was my beginning of my relationship with him. And we had more fun as he visited back in Minneapolis as a ticket manager. He and Canham would come into town, and the phone would ring. He said, where are you taking us out tonight? And I had a little interest in a restaurant back there back then, but he never paid a dime, nor did Canham.
Hi, I'm Bob White, and I played for Al in 1957, his first year here. That happened to be my first year playing. I was a sophomore that year. And this is a hockey story. This is not a funny story about Al, but we were playing up in Minneapolis, and they used to hire their referees from Winnipeg. Minneapolis, Winnipeg are, you know, kind of pretty close to each other. So if you were going to if there was going to be is that okay? If there was going to be one that go against you, you could count on it happening between the Minneapolis-Winnipeg nexus there, you know. So anyway, we lose on Friday night, and it was a close game. The next night we're up 2-1, and one of our guys, a defenseman, most of you, if you were around in '57, would certainly remember him, a fellow named Barry Hayton. Barry got in a little trouble with one of their players, and then when he got in the penalty box, one of their fans decided they would wash his face with hot coffee. Nice thing to do. So that sort of set off his animal instincts. So he took on one of the Minnesota players, and of course got the penalty. Now we're up 2-1, and the crowd is just roaring. And Barry, being somewhat aggressive, responded with some gestures that weren't exactly appropriate. And so off he goes, and we went and we killed that penalty off. And so we won the game 2-1. And we're sitting down in the dressing room, and Bob Watt and I, Watty was our captain, and we're sitting next to each other, and next thing you know, here comes Al. And he's kicking the tape, and he's got his head down. Watty says, "What's wrong?" He said, "I just talked to Ike Armstrong out in the hall. He says it was a disgrace what we did out there tonight, and he says, we'll never play Michigan in another game of any sport." And Al says, "God," he says, "what am I going to do?" He says, "What am I going to tell Fritz?" Watty says, "Call him right now. Don't let Armstrong get a hold of him and give his side of the story and tell him what happened." So Al goes out, and he comes back in, and he walks in, and he just walks across the room, and Watty says, "Well, what did he say?" He says, "Screw him, we won't play him."
Okay, I'm Ross Childs. I played with for Al for 2 years and for Vic for 2 years. And I remember the night in Minnesota, but I remember the first trip to Minnesota, which was on the double-decker plane out of Willow Run. And when we got on the plane, there was a bar downstairs, so most of the team filed downstairs. Then we sat on the runway for two hours while they had some problems. And then they said, "We got to get you off to get you over there in time." And so they were trying to get us off, and Al said to the stewardess, "You get them off, I'm not getting them off." But I'd like to tell you one other thing. A very good friend of Al's was Howard King, who did the announcing at the stadium. And a month or so ago, maybe more, Al wanted to talk to Howard King. And so he didn't have a good phone number. He called me, and I got a phone number. They had a great conversation. And Howard lives up by Traverse City, so. But the thing was, when I called Howard to tell him about Al's passing, he said, "You know, I came from Ohio State. And when I came up to Ann Arbor, my first day in Ann Arbor, the first person I met was Al Renfrew." He said, "If everyone is as nice as this man," he said, "it's going to be great to be in Ann Arbor." That was Al Renfrew.
Bob Watt. It's 1956. I'm finishing junior hockey in Toronto. I get a call from Al Renfrew. "We'd like you to come to North Dakota." And I said, "Okay, Al, that'd be fine. I'll come out and take a look at that." And just a week before I was getting ready to leave, I get a call from Vic Heiliger. And Vic says, "We'd like you to come down to Michigan and take a look at our school." And I said, "I'll come down, but I made a commitment that I'd go out to North Dakota." He said, "Well, come on down and see what you think." So I go down, liked it. In 1956, Canadian guys didn't know a good school from a bad school. So I come down to Michigan, and I said, "Well, that's very, very nice. I like it. But I made a commitment. I got to go up there." So I have my own car, and I drive all the way to North Dakota. I get out there at 6 o'clock in the morning. I look at the barracks. They're like Stalag 17 that the guys live in. And I said, "Al, I can't do this. I got to go back to Michigan." So I go back to Michigan, and the next year, I meet Al at the rink. And he's the coach. And I said, "Al, you could have stuck me out in that prairie for a long, long time." just got one other little thing. That was the first time I met Al. The last time was in January of this year, towards the end of January, at Super Bowl time. And Lenny Tettlebaum would bring Wilf and Tom Pendlebury and Bob White and I were down in Florida at this time, and we'd get together and have dinners, play golf, and we'd go to the racetrack. Well, Bob White and Lenny know how to handicap horses, but we're at a dog racetrack. So these guys are handicapping horses out in California, and there's Al, Tom Pendlebury, and Wilf and myself, and Al and myself, the four of us sitting at a table. Well, they're doing that, what are we gonna do? So we decide we're gonna take turns betting on the dogs. So we're at a dog race, we're gonna bet on the dogs. So we all take turns betting on the dogs, and we had more fun than Carter's guy had little pills. It was a lot of fun. But last year, Al had a little heart problem getting off the plane. And he gets off the plane, and Lenny, and he was in the hospital in Naples, Lenny and Wilt, and he's recuperating, and we always went to the racetrack on Friday. So Al's there in the hospital recuperating from this, and he's telling the doctors, I don't care how long this takes, but I gotta be out by Friday because I got a heavy duty appointment. He was a great guy, he was a great coach, but he's even better than that, he's a good friend.
I'm Bill Moak. I'm a baseball player in 1953. And I got to meet Al later on in his life and became really, really good friends with him. I knew him in Ann Arbor, and he and Don Lund helped me in the Letter Winners Club activities and with the Hall of Honor activities. But Al had a second life up at the lake. And that's where he and I and my wife got really, really into his life. I was going to take him on a Sea-Doo ride. And Al had no idea that he was going to get on a Sea-Doo. And I talked with Judy about it, and we kind of had a pact that sooner or later we were going to get Al on a Sea-Doo. So after a couple years of encouragement and cajoling and so on, the day has arrived. So our house is just down the lake from Al's, and I go down with the Sea-Doo, and it's a 3-seater, and so I pull it up short on the shoreline so Al can get on it, and we're up, and we're putting the life jacket on him, and he doesn't want to do this. And we get it on, and I get it around his stomach, and he said, shut up. He said, wait a minute. What's the matter? He said, can I wear my ice skates? I said, no, you can't wear your ice skates. So we get this on, and we walk into the water, and we go to get on the Sea-Doo. Now, for him to get in knee-deep water and try to put his leg over and get on, it ain't going to work. So we get up in shallow water so he can you picture him now? Life jacket on, straddling the Sea-Doo over the seat, and all of a sudden he stops. I said, now what? He said, if I had any sex life left, I'd go get a cup. So we get on, and we're going around, and I got my arms around him like with the grandkids, and I hear him talking. I stopped the Sea-Doo, and I said, now what are you saying? He said, I'd feel a hell of a lot better if this lake were frozen.
Always put his foot up on the boards, and he'd yell at the officials and everybody else, and he'd be up there and be yelling, and he was at Wisconsin, and the Wisconsin students were behind him, and if you know hockey, you know the Wisconsin students are kind of rowdy. And so anyway, they were yelling at him, sit down, we can't see, sit down, we can't see. And he finally turns around and goes, maybe you ought to be officials. And after that, they thought he was great.
Born of 4 children. I just want to tell a couple of stories. I've known the Renfrews, of course, before I even remembering. My parents used to ship us all off to the Renfrews when they didn't know what to do with us. As my brother said today. Is this better over here?
No, it's better. You're fine.
Okay. I just want to, first of all, toast my Auntie Marge, whose birthday will be on the 13th of December. And then Uncle Al, whose birthday will be on the 21st of December. And so I just want to... Oh, and Carol, yes. Carol's was today. We celebrated that. Thinking back on my Aunt Marge, who was my second mom, of course. She was the quintessential coach's wife, and she taught me that at a very early age. I remember my first year in Houghton. It was probably Uncle Al's first year coaching in Houghton, and they were in these barracks, exactly, and they were trying to make it home and cozy, and Uncle Al said to Marge, well, why don't we paint the kitchen? And Marge said, well, fine. What color should we paint it? Now, this is the first time, I didn't really exactly know what the term was, but it was actually politically incorrect because they painted the kitchen a blazing maize and blue in the middle of Houghton, Michigan. So you can imagine these colors, only iridescent. So that was my first memory of Houghton. And also I want to call David Newton up here. Come on, Dave. Now all of you who were here 10 years ago celebrating Uncle Al's 80th have heard the story already. So again, I'm up in Houghton. And David Newton was my very first boyfriend. Fourth grade from Burns Park. So do you want to take it from here, David? Do you remember?
I remember a little bit about this. Because she was my sweetheart. I wrote her a letter. And unfortunately, Al intercepted the letter. Now you take it.
Okay, so someone mentioned today that Uncle Al was from Toronto, and he got a very good education, and he understood English, and he understood. So he intercepts the letter and reads it at lunch. David's saying, "Dear Sue, I miss you. Please come home to Ann Arbor." Whatever. I don't even remember.
You don't remember. Come on.
But he was correcting all of David's grammar, which was great grammar. But luckily, David went on to meet Cookie, happily married, and I'm married to David Handy. So both of you stand up, please.
I'm Obi Benedict, and I was the baseball coach at the University of Michigan. And I have to tell you that Al didn't understand a lot of things because he asked me one day, he says, "Is the baseball blown up or stuffed?" And I asked him, "Is the hockey puck, what is that? Is that rubber?" But anyway, let's talk about Al. Al was right across the aisle from me in the second floor. That's where we did all of our recruiting and everything. And he was just a gentleman man. He was the happiest man I've ever known. He had a smile on his face every time, and he was a great storyteller. And he was the first guy to laugh every time he had that story. And I don't think we knew anything about the story, but we laughed with Al. And I've been with him, probably anywhere longer than Al. because I coached at Michigan for 26 years and been around him for 26 years. And he was just a wonderful person. And his wife was just like him. They were two beautiful people. And you gather here today to honor him. You all know what he was like. He's a great person, and I'll miss him very much. Thank you.
Rick here. I'm one of Al's grandchildren, and my heart's beating pretty fast because I got a pretty embarrassing story to share, which my siblings are going to get a kick out of. So a couple things. One funny thing about Grandpa was that like every holiday, we always got together for holidays, and we'd have nice family photos and whatnot, and everyone would be smiling, and then there'd be Grandpa with his head tilted to the side looking at the television watching the game. So I don't know if any of those made it into the screen, the reel of photos today, but pretty commonly Grandpa was looking off to the side in all of our family photos. A funny story that has more to do with our grandma, I would have told at her funeral, but I didn't find out until afterward, actually. And I guarantee it'll be a pretty funny one for you guys. So I was probably 6 or 7 or thereaughts, and we were shopping for Christmas presents at the mall, and we were at Claire's or whatever it is where you get earrings and whatever, and I was big into giving everybody presents, so I got my grandma a necklace. And so at Christmas, she opened it, she said, "Wow, Greg, wow, thanks for this necklace, it's just wonderful," and she wore it. And 14, 15 years later, after her funeral, and we're there together, someone brings up, "Yeah, what about that time Greg bought Grandma that belly chain?" And I'm like, "What? What are you talking about? I didn't buy Grandma a belly chain." And then they said, "Yeah, at Christmas you gave her a belly chain, and we've been laughing about it ever since. She never had the heart to tell you." So, that's just a testament to our family. We're a very close-knit family. I remember being blown away when I found out about that. We were so lucky having grandparents that we had. Grandpa was like this larger-than-life personality, and he was our grandpa, and he did a great job. He left a tremendous model for the rest of us to follow, and so did our grandmother, and we had a lot of fun all along, and just very, very thankful, and so happy to see so many friends and family here tonight. So a little bit of the laundry in my closet now or whatnot, 'cause that's one of the good ones, so thank you.
My name's Randy Neal. I was on Rennie's team that had more Michigan records than any other team. They talk about the 64 team, the famous 64 team, the 64 team. We were the infamous 72 team. His last year. We made him the ticket manager. Rennie would come into our dressing room once a week and say, "Guys, this is the greatest opportunity of your life. Make sure you enjoy it." And we did. We'd be on the road, and back then in the WCHA, every second weekend we were flying to these exotic places like Duluth, Houghton. Friday and Saturday night, and every Saturday night we had let loose. And Rennie led the league in letting loose, believe me. Every Sunday morning on these road trips, we were in the airport in pain. But nobody was in more pain than Rennie. He was unbelievable. He came into the dressing room once in my freshman year and he had different colored socks on. I said, Rennie, you got different colored socks? He said, "Arr." This is how quick Rennie is. He says, I got another pair like I'm at home. You could never do it with him. He was unbelievable. That was back in the era we could actually razz the freshmen. And he would be involved. Rennie, he called me Ransom. The only guy in the world called me Ransom. That handle he had forever, eh? Ransom, Ransom. Anyways, Rennie was, first of all, a great hockey player. He was All-American, correct? No, he wasn't All-American, but he was a great hockey player. In 1972, it was the end of Rennie's era as our coach. There was a new era of coach coming in, and he was tired of coaching, and he had enough. But every practice, and he skated us hard. He skated us hard, but I remember we'd stand there having a drink of water, and he'd say, watch this. And then once a day, once a practice, he would go in on the goalie, do a quick little move on All-American Robbie Moore, and score every day. Every day. He'd be in the NHL today. He would be the automatic guy, shootout artist. He'd sit on the end of the bench eating popcorn all game, and then bring Rennie out, and he'd score that automatic goal. He was unbelievable. He was about 48 years old. He'd score every time. It was unbelievable. We were freaked out. Anyways, I called some of my friends. Back in 71, 72, we had 6 French Canadians on our team. We called it the Flying Frenchmen. Gary and Ponch and Michel, Rick Millette, Paul-Andre Paris, and Gary Connolly. Now, Gary Connolly was a radical. Now remember, this was the 70s. Now if you remember the 70s, you weren't there. Gary played 4 years here at Michigan, and he got kicked off the team three out of the 4 years. The only reason he didn't get kicked off the first year is because he broke his ankle. So I called Gary this week. He's in PEI teaching French, and he says, he told me some stories about Rennie. This is early 70s, eh? And we used to remember the Great Lakes, it still goes on, right? The Great Lakes tournament between Christmas and New Year's. We used to play in the Olympia, and we came back to school and had a practice, and Gary's cousins show up from northern Quebec, see? They show up, and one of them's missing an arm and a leg. So this was back in the terrorist days of Quebec. They wanted to separate, and they were kidnapping politicians, killing, the kidnapping. It was really serious. They called out an army, the 1 tank and the 6 guys. You guys remember, you know what I'm talking about. So Gary's cousins were terrorists, and he was basically a terrorist too, because when Rennie would say yes, he would say no, no, it's yes, and got kicked off the team 3 years in a row. And these guys came down, drove in from northern Quebec, wanted to go to the Olympia to watch the tournament. And Gary said to Rennie, he says, Rennie, can I take my friends? They come down from northern Quebec. They don't know how to get to the Olympia. Can I drive them down with them? And Rennie said, no, you come on the team bus. And so, of course, Gary went and drove with them to the game. Rennie kicks him off the team for the 3rd time. And so at the time, back in that era, they were blowing up mailboxes with bombs, the terrorists. And Gary was close. So 20 years later, here's Rennie, how quick Rennie is. 20 years later, there's the golf reunion in August, right? Gary shows up Hadn't seen Gary in 20 years. The guy he's kicked off the team 3 times. He says, guard the mailboxes, here's Connolly. Here's another quick one. Rennie was, dinner speaker. God almighty, he was crazy. Postseason, he's introducing the team. There's Roy Ashworth. Roy Ashworth from Moose Jaw. Stand up, Roy. Show everybody what somebody from Moose Jaw looks like. Typical Rennie. Anyways, no, that's post-party. So I talked to Gary, French-Canadian from PEI, and his buddy Jean-Yves Cartier, who came to school here, Punch, and Punch says, he was like a father to me. And he says one time out in Colorado, we were playing Colorado College, and of course we rented a car and we missed the plane. Gary and Punch. And Rennie's such a great guy, he left them 2 tickets. Sweetheart, great guy, we loved him. And that's it for me.
This is my good side. Speaking of Punch, that's Doug Hyland. Yeah. I had never been exposed to any French Canadians or Frenchmen for that matter, so all the French I ever learned when I came to Michigan were all cuss words. And of course, when I went home and was saying all these French words like I knew what I was talking about, oh, you didn't say that, did you? I learned it from Punch, by the way. So anyway, we were out in Colorado Springs playing Colorado College for the weekend. And this was Donnie's my only trip back home that year. And Dad was still living in the Springs. And so we were playing Friday night, and then we were going to play Saturday night and take the bus and catch the red eye at 2 o'clock. Was it 2 o'clock, Jim? And so Mr. Keogh and where's Mr. Dom? Paul Dom, we were sitting in a room, and we said, it'd be a lot of fun if we could take a little later flight because Dad was having a party at his house that night. So, well, let's go see if Rennie will go for this. We talked to Gus Kraus because he was a trainer. So we go to Rennie's room, we knock on the door, and we go in there, and Jimmy says, so Coach, there's another flight at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. We'd some of us like to stay and catch that 7 o'clock flight rather than go with you guys at 2 o'clock and catch the red eye home. So Al's sitting there, he says, let's see, who wants to stay? And it was the usual suspects. And so he's sitting there thinking, well, oh, by the way, Gus Crouch is going to be our chaperone. You know, the fox guard, the hen house. So he's sitting there thinking, okay, all right. Now, this is about 7 or 8 of us, and he says, all right. He says, okay, all right. Now just be careful. As we're walking out, getting ready to leave, and he stands up and says, and there's one more thing, guys. He says, what's that, Coach? He says, look, if you get killed, I'm probably going to lose my job. And then we stayed up all night, and we only got home, an hour and a half after the guys had left at 2 o'clock. So, yeah, that was typical, Rennie. That's my story.
I couldn't stand up on skates if I wanted to. And for me to stand up here with a group of guys that played for Al is probably ridiculous. But I want you to understand one thing. This Wednesday, the next coming Wednesday, be 1 year since I lost my wife. And she worked for Al Renfrew. And she would come home and enjoy the day because she had time to spend with him. And I want you to understand that is kind of disconcerting. But I knew one thing. Al Renfrew was a gentleman. Al Renfrew was what we all should aspire to be. I have known him since I came here. He never, ever said a bad word about anybody. That is a tremendous thing to remember. We may sit here and tell all the funny stories and all the things that he's been involved with, but I want you to understand one thing. I hope today he and Ann are exchanging a joke so that she may have a little humor wherever she is. For you see, they really liked one another. We can pay all the accolades we want about his coaching, about how he took care of young men, and what he did for his family. But let me tell you one thing. We need men like Al Renfrew. I only hope that young coaches who come along will learn and emulate and be like a man like Al Renfrew. It's lucky, we are lucky to have been a part of his life, because he certainly was a part of our life.
Hear, hear.
That's exactly what I thought I'd do. I'm George Renfrew, Al's younger brother. We were lucky enough to grow up in North Toronto, and we loved to play hockey. We were fortunate enough to live just about a half a block from an ice rink at John Ross Robertson Public School. And we would go up there after school and play in the hockey rink till we were dead tired. Come home with all our skates, pads, everything on, lean on the steps at the side door. Our mom would give us our supper on plates on the floor. We would eat our supper without taking just our hockey gloves off and head back to the rink. And it closed about 9:30 or 10 usually, and we were there till it closed. And that went on for years. And finally, thanks to Jack McGinnis, I know some call him John, but we knew him as Jack, he organized a scholarship for some of us hockey players up in North Toronto. And we all went to De La Salle. There was John McGinnis, Al, my brother, myself, and Ross Smith, who also went to Michigan. Anyway, the first year we were there, we won the Junior B OHA Championship, which was Ontario's best hockey team at that time. And Al went on to be in the Fleet Air Arm. So did the other boys disappear. But then John again organized a trip down to Michigan, and John and Al and Ross Smith all went to Michigan. And in those days, the scholarship wasn't quite as good. I know they were working their butts off down in the cafeteria to make things meet, but they made it through, and John, of course, became a hockey coach up at Michigan Tech. Al went from Tech over to North Dakota and then back to Michigan. The thing I want to tell you about Artie Bell's story, and we all get a kick out of this, is Artie Bell was another hockey player, just like Ross and John and Al. And he got to be very close to being expelled from the school. He was just the biggest instigator of the class you ever saw. So he happened to get a elastic out and fired it and hit this girl in the ear. And oh, well, she put on a real show of pain, anguish. How could anybody do this to her? So the teacher said, who did this? Well, Artie was ready to be thrown out of school at this point, so Ross and Al and John McGinnis and Artie all stood up. And this was very confusing for the teacher. She didn't know where to go with this one. So they all went down to the principal's office, and there was a principal who was called Frosty John McKellar at that time. And fortunately, he took pity on them, and Artie wasn't expelled. But the fact that they all stood up and supported Artie, we all remembered, you know, the togetherness that they stood for. The funniest thing of this is that Artie Bell later became principal of that school. Anyway, Al was a great brother. We played hockey together. One of my biggest thrills was when I was still at De La Salle. We played Michigan for a game here in Michigan, and we lined up together, and Al was left wing, of course, and I was right wing. So we were both on the first line, and when we lined up at Michigan Stadium, he was right opposite me, looking at me, said, "You're not going to win this game." Michigan won 6-3, but it was a great privilege, and I actually went to Scotland to play hockey for a year after I left Dell, and when Al came to Michigan. So anyway, that was, Judy always remembered the Artie Bell story, and that was the Artie Bell story.
Five minutes left.
Last shift.
State your name.
This is not part of the program. I'm Red Berenson, the current coach of Michigan. And one thing we've been doing at Michigan since I've been here is we're trying to endow our hockey scholarships. So for example, it cost us $700,000 a year to pay for our scholarships. And we've been trying to endow our scholarships. So like, for example, Lenny Titelbaum is endowed a scholarship, and he's in our present tonight. And we have a scholarship in Al Renfrew's name, and a lot of people have donated up to $10,000 this week, just in remembrance of Al. And I want you to consider that. Some of us over $1,000 per head, and we're trying to get that up so that we can afford, so we can make the hockey program fully financially independent. You heard me talk about $80,000 and $40,000 and so on. Well, this is about $700,000. So we get 4% for you guys. You all graduated, I hope. 4% of $20 million would be how much? John Pelkamp.
You're the economics.
Anyway, it's $800,000, right? So we know that. So that's our goal. So we're at about $14 million now, and our athletic department is trying to raise money to endow all the scholarships in all the sports. So we're doing a good job in hockey, and we're continuing, and I know you guys have a a feeling about what can I do to help Michigan, what can I do to help Al Renfrew. Well, maybe make a donation to the Al Renfrew Hockey Scholarship. And that goes to a certain individual every year. And the Renfrew family will meet that individual, and every year it'll be on. This is a personal thing. This is investing in education, not just an investment in bricks and mortar. So it's a good thing, and we're doing a good job at Michigan, and I would like you guys to think about that, and I'm thinking about it myself. So Chuck, what do you think about that? You're with me. Good. You match me and you'll be in good shape. So do we have any questions about that? I want to thank Jerry Hanlon for stepping up here. Jerry Hanlon was a football coach. He loved Al Renfrew. And we had so many people outside of the hockey community that loved Al Renfrew. And they didn't know anything about him as a coach or a player, but they loved him for what he was and who he was and what kind of a person he was. And we have a lot of people here that are hockey orientated. I never mentioned today that this guy was a player-friendly coach. Now what does that mean? That means a coach who is going to let the players do what they want. To a point. But we were respectful and we were appreciative of everything we got at Michigan. We thought, wow. We got Northland Pro sticks. We got a new stick every game. Or whatever we got, we appreciated it. The 70s, you guys, Randy Neal, you guys, I know what you guys, you wanted the world. And now you're going to take advantage of your coach. That was the demise of guys like that. It was a whole different world. And you can't coach into different decades. And I don't know why I'm still coaching. Anyway, that's the deal. I want to thank everybody here. We have a tremendous program in terms of our history in hockey. You know, and think about this. In 1958, when I chose Michigan to come to school to play hockey, one of the reasons was they had won the most national championships of any other school. Is that right, Whitey?
It is.
Is that right, Whitey?
9.
Right? You guys remember that? And we're still struggling. We're still pushing. And Al had a chance to win one in 64. And we should have won a hell of a lot more than we've won since I've been here. But that's the goal. And the other goal is to create, and not create, but to help these kids get an education so they're good people. And we've had so many terrific people. And some of them are sitting here, and some of them are here that got slipped between the cracks. I would tell you one thing, if Al were here tonight, he would say, I can't believe my former players look so old. He would say that, right? And he would say things, I'm not trying to be funny, this is you guys look old. So you always took Al Renfrew with a grain of salt. He would say things that were off the wall, and you'd say, what the hell is that? And then you realize that, geez, he was right. And then he would say other things that you seem like, well, everybody knows that. But nevertheless, Al was a great friend, a great mentor. He was a coach. But most of all, he was a great person. I think that's what we're leaving here with. And I want to thank everybody for coming up here. And I wasn't scheduled to be here, but I'm glad I am. So thank you.